faster than a speeding bullet,
I ran until my muscles burned and my veins pumped battery acid.
more powerful than a locomotive.
An idea is like a virus, resilient, highly contagious.
Able to leap tall buildings at a single bound.
Hey guys, Jared Moon here from Into 3 Fitness, and welcome to the Better Humanology podcast. Before we jump in to today's show, I just want to let you know, if you have been thinking about joining our training, now is a great time. We have little interjections every 4 weeks where it is a great time for athletes to come in. We are doing that right now, onboarding new athletes because we're going from deload to kind of a new wave within the bigger cycle. So if you guys want to get involved in our training, you feel like you missed out or you got to wait till the next one, that is not true. Now is the best time to get in and get consistent. We're doing a lot of cool stuff with giveaways, challenges, shirts, personal records, all sorts of stuff. So go to garagegymathlete.com, sign up for a 2-week free trial, and join us in our training. Now, today we have a really cool guest. His name is Brandon Webb, and he recently wrote a book. He's written a few books, Mastering Fear, a Navy SEAL's Guide. So he was a former Navy SEAL. He was in the teams for almost 10 years, and he ran one of the best sniper programs in the world. His story alone about how he was raised, on a ship, on a sailboat with his family and all sorts of stuff. He just has the most incredible life journey. He really is, or resembles, the most interesting man in the world. And I think you can get a lot out of it. We also talk about mastering fear, because if you think about it, we're all fearful in some way, right? We're lacking confidence, or we're not taking some step that we need to, some leap, whether this is some physical barrier or mental barrier. They really go hand in hand. So without any further ado, let's get to the Brandon Webb podcast here, Mastering Fear, a Navy SEAL's Guide. And again, guys, if you want to join us in our training, go check us out, garagegymathlete.com. Other than that, have fun with this one. All right, Brandon, welcome to the Better Humanology podcast, man. I'm pumped to have you on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So we're going to get started with some challenges before we get into anything else. So first, let's do a fitness challenge.
So fitness challenge, this would be kind of what I would put out as my workout.
Everyone listening, we like to get a challenge in from time to time. So whatever you think would challenge us.
One of my favorite workouts is a deck of cards workout.
Okay.
And what I do is with the jokers in the deck, so full deck, every card flipped over, you have to do the number of push-ups. If it's a face card, it's 20. Aces are 21. Jokers are 100 crunches. And it takes about probably 45 minutes to get through that deck. And the idea is not to take breaks. And you just shuffle up and get it done. But that's one of my favorite workouts. And it's been known to bring guys to their knees.
It sounds like a lot of repetitions. That's awesome. Now, how about a mental toughness challenge?
Mental toughness challenge. I would say anyone that, I did the Catalina Classic paddleboard race. It's probably one of the toughest, most mentally demanding races I did. So I'm a big fan of like the ultra races because it really forces you to dig deep. The Catalina Classic was a race I had to qualify for, and that was 32 nautical miles from Catalina Island to Manhattan Beach. It's kind of a physical thing, but I see like mental toughness is not learned overnight. But I would say the challenge I would put out there maybe would be to change the way you talk to yourself. So everybody has this self-talk. I talk about it in my latest book, Mastering Fear. And so how do you replace the negative self-talk with positive self-talk? And so my mental challenge would be to develop a mantra, have it be 5 bullet points, but memorize it and have people, go back, put it in place. And it's a great, like a mantra. I review mine daily. And sometimes if I'm off center, I go review it as well. So I would say that's a pretty good mental challenge.
Yeah, I like that. I especially like, coupling that with long kind of endurance events. I think those do show you who you are a little bit more than trying to go, some high intensity short term workout. Those long ones, you really get to find out who you are.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, how about a book recommendation?
I would recommend Tools of Titans by Tim Ferriss. My best friend Kamal helped edit that book, and Kamal's a great author on his own right, Kamal Ravikant. But Tim did something special with that book. I mean, he just like it's like a reference guide to the latest and greatest minds of the 21st century. I refer back to that book all the time. I think it's a great book, and he divided it up, I think, into like health, wellness, and wisdom. So there's a lot of great stuff in there.
Great book. Yeah, I think so he's got two of them, right? There's Tools of Titans and then Tribe of Mentors. Both of them great books. Yeah, awesome recommendation. I want to second that to anyone listening. Those are great books. You should definitely pick up. All right, man. So let's get a little background on you. Take us as far back as you need to. You have a pretty impressive resume, if I'm going to call it that. Just history. Sounds like a really fun life that you've lived in certain areas, and I know you've met your fair share of challenges as well. But if you could kind of bring us up to speed all the way up to what you're doing today and what you're most passionate about.
Yeah, no problem. So, I had an interesting childhood. I had very adventurous parents who were, full swing in the hippie movement. My dad's Canadian, my mom's American, and my dad moved to Malibu, as a teenager, and was like burning draft cards with his buddies for the Vietnam War. Met my mom, moved us to Canada, to British Columbia, just interior to Vancouver, and my dad started in the construction industry from scratch. Kind of built up a business, had a lot of success, and then I ended up losing the business. And during right near the savings and loans crisis, where interest rates skyrocketed, I think they were like 16%. So, ended up losing pretty much everything. Like, was a very wealthy, from 0 to kind of 4 or 5, and then we were a pretty poor family for a lot of years. My parents had a dream to sail around the world, and so they ended up, I think, by way of, it was a cheap way to live, bought a sailboat, moved the family on it, but also, part of that was chasing this dream to do a cruise, take the family cruising on the sailboat. So we ended up buying a boat in Vancouver, sailing it down to Ventura, California. And we lived on the boat for like 5 years as a family in Ventura Harbor, California, where I got a job on a scuba diving boat called the Dive Boat Peace. It was a 65-foot boat. We had a private chef, a hot tub on the boat. It was an amazing experience. I was about to turn 13 when I took that job, and I was just working for tips. And part of the deal was the owner, Bill, said, "Come on, if it works out, we'll teach you how to scuba dive. We'll certify you how to dive, and after your first summer, we'll put you on payroll." So I worked that job from like 13 to 16. So I had a ton of boating experience, and it was a great place to be as a, teenage kid. I had good mentors. It kind of, I was diving some of the most amazing spots in the world off the Channel Islands, and became like a really competent deckhand and diver at a young age, and also like learn how to overcome a lot of fear. I talk about in Mastering Fear. The first time I can remember really being scared was being woken up at 2 a.m. by Captain Mike, who said the anchor was stuck and I needed to go dive down and get it unstuck, which I had done in the daylight plenty of times. But we happened to be at San Miguel Island, which is the northernmost island in the Channel Islands, right off Point Conception, which is it's just known to be rough weather. In San Miguel Island, where we were diving, the night before was a massive sea lion and seal habitat. And, anybody who's watched Shark Week on Discovery Channel knows that what eats seals is great white sharks. And it was a known great white shark area. We'd spotted them on the surface many times. So here I am at 2 a.m. going, you want me to fucking do what? Like, there's sharks down there. It's 2 a.m. I know the visibility's, going to be crap because the bottom's getting churned up by the big waves. It's one of the reasons we had to move the boat to calmer water for the passengers so they could sleep. So anyway, I was scared to death, and I just said, okay, I got to just do it. Like, I don't want to let these guys down. But so it was just like, a series of events like that I was forced to kind of confront and deal with, and had like strong mentorship, and the captains that did teach me how to dive, and just amazing, when I think back, like a really unique experience. And I got to spearfish, and I started getting into free diving and breath hold only. So it was a really cool experience. And, I didn't know I wanted to be a Navy SEAL at the time, but I was extremely comfortable and competent in the water, which helped me get through what is probably the most difficult part of Navy SEAL training is the underwater stuff. So I didn't have any problems with that when I went through. I had problems with plenty more, but so I remember coming home one night, and my dad we had dinner on the sailboat, and he's like, I'm not going to be the guy that's always talking about taking this trip and never taking it. I don't want to be that guy. And I knew what he's talking about, because everyone in the harbor, it's a small community, and everyone's like, oh, I'm going to sail around the world. And, there's plenty of like these like harbor world travelers that don't go anywhere. So I knew where my dad was coming from, but I was about to turn 16. I did not want to leave on some trip to sail to New Zealand. I wanted to chase girls and get my driver's license. And at the time I was making really good money on the boat. And so we had done some sailing, a few years earlier to Mexico, really fun stuff, but it was only like 3-4 months at a pop. So I kind of reluctantly went on this trip, and I'll try and condense the story a bit, but we went all through Mexico to Acapulco, then Acapulco, 30 days at sea, no land in sight for most of the time, over to the South Pacific, to the Marquesas Islands, which is the first chain of islands as you sail west. And then you have the French Tuamotus, atolls, where they used to test the French used to test the nuclear bomb. And then you have the Society Islands, which is Tahiti, Moorea, Bora Bora, and so on. So we sailed 30 days from Acapulco to the Marquesas. I'd finished my junior year early, like a month and a half. I just knocked it out on independent study. And then my dad and I got in this massive argument in Tahiti, and then he kicked me out. He's like, okay, I think you should go. Wow. And I was like, okay, you're right. I'm out of here. So my mom is crying and my sister's crying. And so I left home at 16, and I had a couple $100 in a backpack and a big chip on my shoulder. And remember, probably, I found a boat that was sailing to Hawaii. It was a catamaran called the Shiloh, and they needed help crewing. And so I literally left a day later. I was gone. And I remember like being scared shitless again, like crying myself to sleep every night. Like, what the hell did I just do? And, I'd been on my own ever since. I came back. I asked the owner of the boat if I could finish high school and work on the boat, which he agreed to. He had plans to like make me one of his young captains, that I didn't want to do that. I always been fascinated with aviation and the military in general. And then I discovered the SEALs. And then I read a book called Rogue Warrior by Dick Marcinko, who was actually the founder of SEAL Team 6. Then I got really interested in that, because I didn't have, if I had a magic wand back then, I would have went to the Air Force and Naval Academy and flown jets, but I didn't have the grades, and I had a really funky school record from being homeschooled. So I went, I said, the SEALs, I can go right in and sign up. So I signed up. I got my parents' permission to do the delayed entry at 17, and then went to boot camp in '93. And I was initially a air crew, search and rescue swimmer, and helicopters. So I'd operate the sonar systems and the helicopters, and then serve as a rescue swimmer on the aircraft carrier. So anytime they fly jets off the carrier, the helicopter has to be flying off the starboard side in case the jet crashes. We jump in and rescue them. So I did that for almost 4 years. And finally, I got my first package denied for SEAL training, which was a real bummer. And I talk about that whole story. And, I had a really crappy chief in charge of my aircrew shop back then. But I tell this whole story in The Red Circle, which is the first book I wrote. But I wanted to go be a SEAL. So I got my second package approved. And I went to SEAL training in 98. And then like 97, end of 97 into 98, I was at BUDS Class 215. BUD stands for Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training. And I started with 220, finished 23 originals. So big, it's a big dropout rate there. I checked into SEAL training completely out of shape. Like I came off an aircraft carrier, and I could meet the bare minimum physical requirements to get accepted, but I did not prepare enough. That became evident on day one when it was like my name coming up over and over again in a class of 200 guys. It was not a nice position to be in on a first name basis with the instructors. But my body was just in full breakdown for probably 2 months. And then I finally forced myself to get in the kind of shape I needed to be in. But I was, I just had the gauntlet thrown at me by these guys, because they, physically I was not a good candidate in their eyes. So, but anyway, I made it through BUDS. Then I wanted to go to SEAL Team 3, because at the time SEAL Team 3 was responsible for Southwest Asia. Before 9/11, the terrorist attacks on 9/11, the SEAL teams were divided up in geography zones. And so SEAL Team 3 had the Middle East, essentially. SEAL Team 4 had South America. Those were the two teams that were really doing work before the attacks at 9/11. We were doing a lot of non-compliant shipboardings in the Middle East, enforcing the sanctions against Saddam Hussein, who was smuggling oil. And then the South America guys were doing a lot of drug interdiction stuff. So I wanted to work. I didn't want to go to SEAL and, work out every day and work on my tan. I wanted to do work. So I got Team 3 on the West Coast, had an incredible first platoon deployment, went to the Middle East. We got to do shipboarding, and we were involved on the USS Cole after it got bombed in Yemen. I was a sniper, young sniper, and set up an overwatch on the Cole. As it almost sank several times in Yemen. For those that don't remember, it was two guys in a crappy boat with a bunch of explosives that basically ran into this billion-dollar warship and almost sank it and killed 17 crew, which is a real eye-opener for me at the time. I was like, wow, the way that we are waging war in the world has changed. It's no longer conventional big tanks and ships. It's very like special ops centric. When you fight an enemy like a terrorist that has no rules, no borders. So I did that deployment. I came back. I got asked by our ops officer to help. Occasionally we would have a problem platoon where the chemistry wasn't working or something just wasn't gelling. And I believe, I knew that platoon was Echo Platoon. And so they had disbanded a lot of the leadership and we're rebuilding it. And Kevin, the ops officer, said, "Hey, can you go in this platoon and help rebuild it?" And he knew I wanted to renew my SEAL contract tax-free. And so that was his leverage over me. He's like, "Oh, they're going to deploy. You'll be in the Middle East and you can get your re-enlistment bonus tax-free." So I agreed to go into this platoon, which was like a blessing and a curse all at once, because when I got there, I realized, wow, it was really in bad shape. The new guys in the platoon weren't trained properly. The older guys, a lot of dysfunction. So I just wanted to go back. I wanted to say, fuck the tax-free and go back to my other platoon, which was like full of rock stars. And then 9/11 happened, and I was in this Echo platoon, and we went right out the door and deployed, spent a little bit of time in the Middle East, and then we're in Afghanistan for most of the 6-month deployment. And yeah, it was, without getting too detailed, it was a good deployment. Like, it felt like we were doing really good work. We had a very clear strategic objective to basically kill a bunch of bad guys and wipe out these terror training camps. And it felt like a really good mission, and we did a lot of good work over there. I would say today, Afghanistan turned into my generation's Vietnam. Like, after 2003, we really lost our way in Afghanistan. And it's a shame, because we've lost so many good people and wasted, billions of dollars. And for what, really? Like, and I remember when I got out in 2006. So I came back from that deployment, went into the sniper instructor space, got recruited to be a sniper instructor. Excuse me. Ended up taking over the course as course manager for the West Coast. So I was in charge of all the instructors, the budget. Guys that came through that course were like Chris Kyle, American Sniper, Marcus Luttrell, who was a personal student of mine, wrote the book Lone Survivor. So it was an interesting time to be in that role, especially when guys were going. Now we were in Iraq at the time. But I invested so much in that course and running it that I just burned out in 2006. So I decided to get out. It was a complete burnout. And when I got out, I saw things from a much different perspective. Back to the Afghanistan thing, I was like, wow, like, what are we doing over there? And then I would talk to my friends, and they're like, yeah, we don't even know why we're over here anymore. So that's a scary place to be for any organization. It doesn't matter if it's a business or you're fighting a war. If you don't know why you're there, like what the mission is and what the reason is, like, that's a big fucking problem. And when you look at Elon Musk, SpaceX, like, the mission is very clear. They want to colonize Mars. Like, everybody is organized around that from the top to bottom. But when you're in a place like Afghanistan, 2004 on, you're like, okay, what are we here for again? Why are my friends dying? So I just wanted to touch on that briefly. But when I got out in 2006, I wanted to start my own business. And I ended up doing some contracting in Iraq to just kind of put some money in the bank. And then I started a business. I was developing a racetrack in Southern California. So we raised a bunch of money with some partners. I put in some money. And then, long story short, we lost the whole project when the housing market collapsed in 2008. And it was just, it was a huge learning lesson for me, but it was a tough one to swallow, because I put in all my life savings, my time, my identity. And now I'm like, wow, I've just lost almost $4 million, and this feels really shitty.
Yeah.
And then my wife was like, by the way, I'm done with this entrepreneur stuff. Like, you put me through enough in the SEAL team, so I'm out of here. And so I'm like, divorced, getting in the middle of divorce, lost the business, and had to kind of reevaluate. And then one of the things I really enjoyed about being a sniper instructor was we had access to all the best minds in sports and in the Olympic arena. And one of my friends and mentors, Lanny Basham, developed the first real mental management program, which is rooted in positive psychology. And so we work a lot with positive psychology. And then back to the beginning of the show when I was talking about self-talk. And so I just said, you know what, I've got to look at what are the benefits of this situation that I'm in right now. And it was, I started looking at the positive over negative and said, okay, well, I I know how to build a business. I know how to raise money. I know how to go to a bank and borrow money through the SBA finance program to buy a cash flowing business. Like I have all the skills now that I never had out of the Navy. And so I just started going, okay, I can do this again. And then I was practical. I went and took a job at a defense company to build up my savings, and then launched my current business in 2012. I got into writing as a hobby and in almost like therapeutic outlet for me. So I started writing and blogging, and I ran a blog for military.com. And then I said, you know what, I'm going to start a business around this. So I launched a website. The year my first book came out, The Red Circle, the website took off. I built another website. Then we did we had our own podcast called Soft Rep Radio, kind of like a military version of Joe Rogan. We have guys on that just talk about guy stuff, being a sniper in Iraq and all sorts of crazy stories. But so I built a media company, and I left my job. My book did well, and then I started writing and building this media company. And 2.5 years ago, we decided to get into e-commerce. So we launched the e-commerce product called the Crate Club, which is like a James Bond in a box every month. It's like really cool gadgets for men. And that business really took off for us, took off almost too fast. In 2 years, it was an 8-figure business for us. And so, wow. A lot of stuff breaks when you start scaling at 300% a year. So a lot of lessons learned there. I moved the business and myself to New York and Puerto Rico 4 years ago. So I have a home in New York, home in Puerto Rico, and an office in both. Today I run that company. I'm a member of the Young Presidents Organization. I serve on the Small Business Advisory Board. It's like a group of veterans that advise the SBA in DC. That's it. I love to fly planes. I have 3 airplanes. I haven't owned a car in 5 years. I have amazing kids, amazing friends, and a really good life that I've, kind of built after losing everything. But I think that's my full long introduction.
It's an awesome introduction, and gives us all a lot of great background. And I was going to ask, where did aviation come into? You said you had an interest in it. So when did you officially pick that up?
Yeah, as far back as I can remember, to the point where my dad took me. My mom made him take me to see Star Wars. I was, probably around 5. And my dad hated sci-fi stuff. He's like, this is bullshit, and my mom's like, just take him to the damn movie. So, this was back when Star Wars came out in the 70s, and there was like people waited in line for hours. And I remember waiting in line with my dad. And when we walked out of that theater, he was like a born again sci-fi. He was like, this is the best movie ever. And became like a hardcore Star Wars guy. So, as a kid, I grew up watching Buck Rogers, Top Gun, all that stuff. And I just always loved aviation. And so when I was 28, I decided to use my off-duty time and my vacation time to go get my pilot's license. And the Navy was really supportive of that. I was going to night school at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, and got my private pilot's and instrument rating while I was on active duty. And then when I was kind of out being an entrepreneur, I bumped into a guy in San Diego, D, who became a good friend of mine. He was a former Air Force fighter pilot that made a lot of money in biotech. And he had this private group of guys, kind of like that movie Fight Club. These guys were all mostly ex-military fighter pilots, like all mostly been to Top Gun before, and they flew these Russian planes called Yak 50s, Yak 52s, and D was a friend of mine, kind of helping me with some entrepreneurial stuff, but he's like, hey, you're a pilot, sell that crappy Cessna and get a Yak and come fly with us. So I I did exactly what he said and bought this old yak, fixed it up myself, and then started flying with these guys. And they trained me up. Like I had the best instructors in the world in my back seat, giving me aerobatic instruction, air combat instruction, upset recovery. I mean, guys that have like 400 hours flying the space shuttle. One of the guys won the first Red Bull Air Race. He was a Red Bull Air Race champion. So like really fortunate to be with these group of guys. And then we had a few, like a Hollywood director in there. So it was like a really cool mix. And it was this fight club. Like we do it twice a year. We don't really talk about it that much. You know, I'm telling you obviously, but you know, we don't really publicize it. Like aviation magazines have wanted to come in and do stories, and we've just said no. But it's a really special group of guys, and I get to do the flying that it's like the pilot's dream, right? We go out and we chase each other around the sky like World War II pilots did, and you know, I've become a much better pilot just being with these guys and getting trained up. And it's just like my hobby. It's like my biggest hobby today is flying and skiing, and I like to surf still. But aviation, to me, I've just met so many amazing people. It's like when I go fly, it clears my head. You know, I have a plane in New York. I buzz around the city all the time, and it's so cool. Like take somebody that's lived in New York for 7-10 years and never seen it from the sky. It's just a cool experience, and I enjoy that very much. So that's kind of my aviation story.
Yeah, man, that's very cool. I think learning how you learned with your elite pilots in that environment sounds a lot better than the way I learned, and it sounds like a lot of fun with the Underground Fight Club. I'll have to check you guys out at some point.
Yeah, no, it's pretty cool. No, it's a pretty cool group of guys.
All right, man. So let's talk about mastering fear a little bit.
Sure.
So, new book, right? Came out a little over a month ago.
Yeah, it came out in August, middle of August.
Very cool. And I kind of wanted to talk about it because we've hit all these points, and obviously at each point, you know, I think you encountered some level of fear from. It's impossible not to. You know, I don't even have to dive into all the different instances that you just listed and how some of those situations could have fear in them. You know, but the big premise of the book, right, is harnessing your fear and turning it into your advantage. And what do you want people to know in being able to do that? What was the main purpose in writing the book? Like, what do you see in people when they are typically faced with fear?
So the book was inspired by me teaching my best friend, who I mentioned earlier, Kamal, how to swim. Like I became friends with Kamal through a mutual friend, and we became really close. And I realized he had this fear of the water, and he said, "Look, I really want to deal with this. I'm in my 40s. I want to, like, where can I go? Could I go to immersion course in Florida?" And I said, "You know, why don't you let me take a whack at teaching you?" And he's like, I had Olympic swimmers try and no one's been able to do it. I said, let me just give me a week and let's try. So he agreed. And so Monday through Friday, I took him every morning to the New York Athletic Club, which is a private club. It's a very cool club. History of the club is they were like instrumental in kind of founding the modern Olympics. So it's a private, really cool workout facility in New York. But they have a great indoor pool. And so I took them all there, and beforehand I said, okay, he's going to be scared of the water. So I got to really work on his confidence and take small steps to kind of build his confidence up. And then I gave him mental visualization homework to go home and like visualize him practicing what we did the day of. And so this was a guy Monday morning that got into the pool, like gripping with the death grip, the stainless steel ladder as he lowered himself in and then pushed off and lunged for the wall. I was like, whoa, this is worse than I thought. But so I started saying, okay, let's do some breathing exercise. I know you don't like putting your head and face in the water, but that's the first thing we're going to do is just get you comfortable with putting your face in the water. So stick it in the water, take a breath, stick it in the water, blow it out, come up, take a breath, and do it 50 times. And then I would just take these other small steps. And by Friday, this is a guy that couldn't even jump into the pool before. He did a cannonball, sunk himself to the bottom like 10, 12 feet, held his breath for half a minute, and then pushed up to the surface and then swam, a few laps, like I think 15, 20 laps. And I taught him, instead of grabbing the wall, his kind of safe space would be to float on his back and kind of gather his composure. But he had learned to swim and overcome this fear of the water. And when we were going back for lunch on the subway in New York, he's like, dude, you got to write a book about this. You changed my life. Like, this is crazy. You taught me how to deal with the fear. You didn't just start throwing swim techniques at me like everybody else. And plus the mental visualization, like rehearsing in your head, which is what I would say most, if not all, Olympic gold medalists do. Constantly rehearse perfection and then also contingency. Like when Michael Phelps was in Beijing on the finals, I forget what event it was, but his goggles flooded, but he had already mentally, visually rehearsed that scenario and knew that he would start counting his strokes. In that final event, he broke a new world record and won the gold medal with flooded goggles because he had the mindset of a champion and he had rehearsed it already. So it wasn't this like drama around the event. It was like, okay, I've been here before. This is what I'm going to do. So I used a lot of that stuff on Kamal, which I talk about in Mastering Fear as well. So he inspired the book. And then I sold the book to Penguin. When my editor, Bria, right away said, okay, do the proposal. So I said, okay, shit, now I have to go figure out how to, like, what this system is. So I learned a lot actually writing the book myself. But, the idea behind the book was to develop a simple system people could apply to a big fear or a small fear. And so I would say a big fear would be fear of water, fear of flying, fear of public speaking. Maybe a minor fear would be, fear of dark places. I don't know. Maybe it's scared to break up with a bad relationship. There's different levels of fear, and to also show people that everybody lives with fear from the day they're born to the day they die. Like, nobody is fearless. That's bullshit. Anyone that says they don't have fear is lying or they're insane. And so, and I wanted to showcase my own stories of dealing with fear to other professionals that I know, like my friend Betsy Morgan, who left a promising TV career to go run the Huffington Post. She was like the first professional CEO brought on board. And the head of CBS television told her she was crazy. That why would you leave a job? Like, who the hell is going to read the internet or who the hell is going to read the news on the internet? That's what which is like, the media is totally disrupted today by the internet. So, I try and show like successful people, from my friend CJ Ramon, who's the bass player for the Ramones. Like, everybody deals with this fear and at all sorts of different levels, and try and showcase it in a way that shows people that they're not alone, and give them this system to deal with it. So that's kind of the summary behind the book.
Now, in these exercises, mental rehearsal, visualization, using that in sports, like you mentioned the Olympics and swimming and things like that, works great. I know personally, when I was going through pilot training in the Air Force, we used a lot of that in rehearsing for getting ready for the next day's flight, mission, so on and so forth. But what about you're a really successful entrepreneur. Do you use that kind of stuff in your business and creation of new products, or how the business should run, things like that?
Yeah, I use especially the mental management piece in my business, because I can tell when somebody is focused on the problem or the solution, because they just start bitching and moaning and complaining. Oh, this is going wrong, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, wait a minute. Why are you focused on that? Like that does nothing to solve the issue. And so I can spot it so quick, but I look for it when I hire people, whether they have a solution mindset or problem mindset. And it's very easy to figure that out quickly. So I, not only use it to hire, I really focus on, running our business with clear goals, very transparent. Everybody, it doesn't matter if you're a part-time writer for one of our sites to, the guy running logistics for us. Everybody knows what our plan is, what our revenue goals are. I really believe that is important as well. And I get a lot of that really good, strategic planning experience from being in the military and seeing, like, you don't need to create, 100 PowerPoint slides to, the simpler it is, the better. The more clear it is, the better, because shit's always going to change or break, and you'll have to adjust, which I forget what general was quoted, maybe Patton. He said, no plan survives first contact with the enemy.
Right.
Business is the same, it's always something. And people don't act rationally. Like, if anything, what you can count on is they won't act rationally. It's why people get so frustrated. Like, why is this person not doing this? It's in their financial best interest to do this. But people are emotional animals. It's why behavioral economics was invented, because, believe it or not, I think even before the 80s, most economists were running models off of rational behavior. And, a group of guys came along. Robert Thayer is one of them, that he wrote Misbehaving, which is an excellent book about behavioral economics. People thought he was crazy to combine economic theory with psychology. But now that's the way that most economics today is based off of behavioral economics. But business is always something. Sorry, I went on a bit of a rant there, but I've used a lot of my military experience in business, and I'll honestly say some skills translate well. As being with your Air Force experience, some skills don't. Like, you can't settle a dispute by kicking someone's ass behind the office, like you can sometimes in the military.
Yeah, there's different repercussions if you do that in the civilian world.
Yeah, and in the military, I think you transfer. You're at a command for a while, and it's like, while you're at that specific military command, it's like that's all you care about, and whatever it takes to win. But when you're outside, you've got to really think long term, and like how to develop trust and build long term relationships. I see so many guys, especially in the special ops world, because it's so competitive, just like the pilot, you get a certain type of personality that gravitates to those jobs, and they come out and it's like whatever it takes to win, and they're like fucking people over in the process, and they don't realize, like, the short-term win isn't going to translate to long-term success, because people want to be in business with people they like being around and that they can trust. So there's like plenty of skills that don't translate. I talk about that a lot because I try and be a exemplary leader to other veteran entrepreneurs that are starting out. So,
and I'm curious about your writing. Do you write every day?
I write. I mean, I used to write every day. I try and, like, the books that I do, like, so Mastering Fear, for example, like, I wrote a large piece of that. I outlined it, but I work with John Mann he worked with me when I had a finished manuscript for my book, The Red Circle. And my agent said, look, it's a memoir. You're going to leave stuff out that you think is boring that'll be really interesting to people. So that I ended up getting introduced to John, and he made my first book amazing. And so him and I just developed a friendship and a partnership. And John I consider myself a good writer, and John is like an excellent writer. So I just, I work with John now. He lets me write more than I would if I was by myself, because I've written a couple books solo, and it's a lot of work. But to answer your question, I write a lot, but I don't write every day like I used to. When I first started my business, I was blogging. I would write probably twice a day for a year and a half, and you get really good when you do stuff like that. But I remember like reading my original stuff, just cringing at how
right.
it was. Yeah, I mean, writing nonfiction is very different than writing fiction, or which is a make-believe story, right? Like, I'm finishing a book, my first novel based on a true story. And it's taken me 4 freaking years to finish that thing. And I finally had to ask John to help me bring it home. So I'm really excited about that book. It's about a serial killer in the military. And I think I've sold a book to TV before, but this one I think has feature film written all over it. So I'm really excited about this.
That's awesome. I'll have to keep an eye out for it.
Yeah.
All right, man. I'm going to move to the quick fire questions of the show. Are you ready?
Yeah.
What's the hardest workout you've ever done?
Hardest workout I've done was when I thought I was in great shape, leaving, graduating buds. I went and checked into SEAL Team 3 and got my ass beat down by a 55-year-old SEAL who was a maniac. His name was Bob. Man, I thought I was in shape. This guy crushed me, and I was super humbled as a new guy checking into a command. You think you're a stud physically anyway. You don't know crap about tactics yet. But that was the hardest workout I ever had. I remember doing flutter kicks on the grinder. Like, we're at like 1,000, and this guy's not slowing down. Like,
that's awesome. I mean, in your opinion, what's the best activity for building mental toughness?
I think the best activity is to really be a student of the mental game. And I would recommend another book called With Winning in Mind. It's about my friend Lanny, who was Olympic gold medalist, that really pioneered this mental management system for like performance athletics and business, parenting. You're going to be applied to so many different areas. But you got to do your homework and change. You got to like put in the homework and work to kind of change and build your mental game up. And I think, putting yourself in artificial environments that are safe, that force you to dig deep and use mental toughness, that would be like a Spartan race or a marathon, right? Mm-hmm. Something where you're forced into adversity. Because, one thing I think a lot of guys that are successful and graduate SEAL training, we've all dealt with adversity in some form or another during our lives. And when you get to that point, you better have the tools to deal with adversity, because they are going to put you every day over and over and over in adverse situations where you're like, how can I continue this? So I think there's ways to replicate that, like with the Spartan race, the Ironman, the marathon, or, just whether it's a CrossFit workout. And then you kind of like, you prove to yourself that you can dig deep and finish stuff like that. And over time, you get more confident.
Awesome. Now, if you could only have one piece of equipment to train with for the rest of your life, what would it be?
You know what? I honestly, when I travel a lot, I bought these bands. They're these cheap bands. I'm sure there's better ones out there. But it's this like tough elastic band. And I'll do 100 push-ups, 100 crunches, and then use my bands to do shoulders, back, and biceps and triceps. Like the band is just like amazing thing, like to just all resistance. But I do super high reps. I do like, even when I do circuits now, because I blew my shoulder out skiing in the Alps a couple years ago. So I had to do really light weights. And so I wanted to get a workout. So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to do 50 reps. And then I started seeing like how I was getting cut a little bit different by doing high reps. So now all my circuit is high reps. I do like 3 circuits, and if I'm doing chest, it's going to be on the, bench machine. I'm going to do 50 reps, and I'm going to do no rest, 50 bicep curls, 50 tricep press downs, 50, shoulder reps. So I put guys through that workout, and it crushes them. It's like the deck of cards. It'll humble people.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, that resistance bands are incredible. There's so many different ways you can use them too. I think they probably are the ultimate travel tool. Like, I don't know if there's anything really better than that.
Love it. I can bang out a really good workout in 30 minutes anywhere. Hotel room, Airbnb, on the beach. I just carry around those bands.
Awesome. All right, man, last question of the show, and the most important question. What is the best advice you have for becoming a better human? This is 100% open-ended.
You know what? I watched that Joe Rogan podcast with Elon Musk, and I think they nailed it at the end, because Joe asked Elon the same thing, and I love Elon Musk. Like, I think he's one of the smartest living people we have, and just doing amazing stuff. And he said it, because anytime you put yourself in the public eye, like I've, whether I write books and, go on in the media and stuff, you take a lot of trash talking and stuff like that. And it's helped me learn to just always look for the best in people. And, when Joe and Elon finished that podcast, I thought they hit it on the head. He was like, I think looking for the best in people and putting out more love in the world without sounding corny. But I think it's true. Like I'm a parent, as a divorced dad, I have a good relationship with my kid's mom, thank God. But the best thing I can do to raise those kids is for them to know that their mom and dad love them like that. If you do anything and it's that, the kids are going to be okay. And I think that's also a lesson for us as adults, like to be more compassionate today and not jump to conclusions, but just try and look for the best in any person, any situation. That's the best we can do. 'Cause if we're going to become better human beings, like we've got to do that.
I love it, Brandon. All right, man. So where could people go to learn more about you, pick up your books, and all that good stuff?
I would go to my website, brandontylerwebb.com, and I'm on Instagram a lot at Brandon T. Webb. You can see I got a blue and black logo on there with my initials, BW, but I'm always on Instagram, or they can go to my author website, brandontylerwebb.com.
Awesome. And I'll link to all that in the show notes. Brandon, I really appreciate you being on the Better Humanology podcast. Thanks, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jared. I appreciate it.
Your best. Losers always whine about their best.